way of thy precepts. So shall I talk of thy wondrous works. My soul melteth for heaviness. Strengthen thou me according to thy word. Remove from me the way of lying, and grant me thy law graciously. I have chosen the way of the truth. Thy judgments have I laid before me. I have stuck to thy testimonies. O Lord, put me not to shame. I will run the way of thy commandments.
Hello, good morning, and welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing in the book of Isaiah, chapter 38. We're going to read it again. It's fun to read it, and hopefully maybe I'll get better at it. I don't know. I think I'm better at it the first time, actually. I like letting things hit me raw, as far as emotionally. Reading, I'll probably read it better. In those days was Hezekiah sick unto death, and Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amos, came unto him, and said unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Set thine house in order, for thou shalt die, and not live. And Then Hezekiah turned his face toward the wall, and prayed unto the Lord, and said, Remember now, O Lord, I beseech thee, how I have walked before thee in truth and with a perfect heart, and have done that which is good in thy sight. And Hezekiah wept sore. I didn't read it very emotionally. Then came the word of the Lord unto Isaiah, saying, Go and say unto Hezekiah, Thus saith the Lord, the God of David thy father, I have heard thy prayer, I have seen thy tears. Behold, I will add unto thy days 15 years. And I will deliver thee and this city out of the hand of the king of Assyria, and I will defend this city. And this shall be a sign unto thee from the Lord, the prophet speaking, that the Lord will do this thing that he hath spoken. Behold, I will bring again the shadow of the degrees, which is gone down in the sundial of Ahaz, 10 degrees backward. So the sun returned 10 degrees, by the which degrees it was gone down. The writing of Hezekiah the king of Judah, when he had been sick, and was recovered of his sickness. I said in the cutting off of my days, I shall go to the gates of the grave. I am deprived of the residue of my years. I said, I shall not see the Lord, even the Lord in the land of the living. I shall behold no man no more with the inhabitants of the world. Mine age is departed and is removed from me like a shepherd's tent. I have cut off like a weaver my life. He will cut me off with pining sickness. From day even to night wilt thou make an end of me. I reckoned till morning, that as a lion, so will he break all my bones. From even to night wilt thou make an end of me. I'm sorry, from day even to night wilt thou make an end. Okay, that's what it's supposed to be. I was like, why was that not parallel? It is. Like a crane or a swallow, so did I chatter. I did mourn as a dove. Mine eyes fail with looking upward. O Lord, I am oppressed. Undertake for me. What shall I say? He hath both spoken unto me, and himself hath done it. I shall go softly all my years in the bitterness of my soul. O Lord, by these things men live, and in all these things is the life of my spirit. So wilt thou recover me and make me to live. Behold, for peace I had great bitterness, but thou hast in love to my soul delivered it from the pit of corruption. For thou hast cast all my sins behind thy back. For the grave cannot praise thee. Death cannot celebrate thee. They that go down to the pit cannot hope for thy truth. The living, he shall praise thee, as I do this day. The father to the children shall make known thy truth. The Lord was ready to save me. Therefore we will sing my songs to the stringed Therefore we will sing my songs to the stringed instruments all the days of our life in the house of the Lord. For Isaiah had said, Let them take a lump of figs, and lay it for a plaster upon the boil, and he shall recover. Hezekiah also had said, what is the sign that I shall go up to the house of the Lord? I was thinking about immediately the parable of the fig tree, which I haven't talked about in context of this, because one of the things, I did a study on the parable of the fig tree, and there's no real overarching parable of the fig tree that I could find. This would be the closest thing, maybe. Because here we have these figs. The nation Israel was on the verge of destruction. Well, Judah at this point. But God's chosen people and his anointed king, were at the verge of destruction. And as it's averted, the king becomes sick and he is made to recover by a lump of figs. If Jesus had a passage in mind when he cursed the fig tree, this would probably it. And I almost regret that study. I want to know, did I even cover this verse? As far as like a lot of the other stuff, I never heard anyone really tie it in. But this would be the best possible linkage, because a lot of the other fig tree passages don't seem to have any bearing on that parable at all. But this would. Not the parable, but when Jesus curses the fig tree and it withers away. Well, that's the thing. It's not the parable of the fig tree. When the fig tree, well, there's something to do with Israel with that, right? But like here, the king recovers and the nation is preserved when the lump of figs is placed on there. And so when Jesus curses the fig tree, what happens? The nation is uprooted and dispersed throughout the nations. That's what happens within less than a century after Jesus. I mean, it was just a generation later. Many of the people of his time, would have already, they'd be pretty young. For Isaiah it said, let them take a lump of figs. Okay, but we were on verse 18. Or what did I say we were starting on? Let me just see the 17, yeah. Because I didn't feel like we were exactly finished there either. All right, so, sorry, you know what? Hold on a second here. All right, that's better. I can breathe. I said, I just always have this issue because of the surgery on my nose. I have scabs that built that never quite healed yet. It's been like 7 years. It's 2014. It's been a while since I had my nose. I forgot exactly when I had my nose, broken nose, the inside fixed, but it fixed it, but it sort of didn't. I'm happy to be able to breathe occasionally through my nostrils now, though. All right. So we said 17, for peace I had great bitterness. We talked about the bitterness of soul, like interpreting what that was about. And I talked about the passage in Revelation where he ate the little book and it made his belly bitter. It was sweet as honey in his mouth, but his stomach was bitter about it. It landed bitterly. Because, and there's a lot of, I suppose there's a lot of ways to look at that, So when I say because, it's like I pause there because I'm like, well, I don't know precisely. I have some ideas. Because there is, the Word of God is sweet, and the message of God is good, and the gospel of God is gracious and wonderful. But within it, we still die. Unless you're part of the final generation, you still got to die like everybody else and trust God. And that's what this is about. Because yes, I'm going to talk about the obvious things about the grave and all that. But, the part about the living shall praise you. God is not God of the dead. So the dead they can't praise him. They can't celebrate him. Those and when it comes to ultimate things, that's what the second death represents. They cannot hope for truth. They cannot praise from that position because that is death. You have to be alive. Now, how do we reconcile the idea that, the Bible in the Old Testament especially really does teach that death is just the end. So you just go out, lights out, just like you imagine it, just like you think it is for everything else that exists. It's just as we instinctively know, we know what death is like. People want to think and imagine it's other things, like they're going to the body will disappear and they'll still be conscious. There'll just be like a ghost standing there. You know what I mean? You've never been unconscious before? And believe me, like when your body goes out, you go unconscious and you stay that way. You're dead. God makes us alive. And how does he do that in this context? I love this because it's so much like a preview of the gospel, but not explicitly. He sees himself, his soul, delivered from the pit of corruption, death. He was about to die. That's what salvation is from. It's from our death, or from a terrible fate. That's a lesser terrible fate. From captivity, we could be saved, right? Some people think hell is captivity, actually. And hell is sort of captivity, though. I mean, the grave holds captive, doesn't it? But it's not like, well, whatever. I don't feel like arguing the unconscious conscious part because I think it's just silly after a while. The living, to be alive, is to be conscious. I think, therefore, I am. If you have thoughts, you're alive. You can't mince words about that. Oh, that's not really alive. They're actually spiritually dead. That's nothing. That's nonsense talk. Metaphorical death is not real death. And but the death that God proposes is real. People not understanding that, I think, causes them to be flippant about it. Also, the tendency to take literal, symbolic things has a way of making your religion look cartoonish. You know what I mean? And I think that's what a lot of people look at Christianity, and they look at the way fundamentalists interpret everything literally, and it looks cartoony, and it looks weird, and it doesn't make sense. And that's all right. That's part of the hidden wisdom, that what is foolish to man is wisdom to God, because they don't take the time to really try to understand. And even in those cartoonish understandings, there is a wisdom. I mean, it's not that someone can have a cartoonish understanding of the Bible and not be saved. I mean, absolutely. But it's not helpful from a knowledge standpoint to always be looking at it like a child. Here, you've delivered me from the pit of corruption. And what goes on down there is death and devastation and everything gone. And what brings us there? Sin. So he says, you've cast all my sins behind your back. Because that's what he needs to be. He knows that when he's dying, he knows he deserves to die. We all know it. Set your house in order, Hezekiah. He didn't go like, what? I've served God. He said, Lord, remember my service. He wept. He didn't want to die. God knows our frame. He does not grudge us our sorrow or our bitterness, the bitterness of life and of the soul. Because life can be bitter. Because we discussed this last time. It says, because we have to endure things. Like when I talked about Peter, when he said to him, thus he signified with what death he would glorify God. And if you think Peter, when he was suffering that death, was like, always look on the bright side of life. You think he was doing that? He was whistling and dancing and singing as he suffered? I don't think so. Was he cursing God? No. Was it a bitter end? Yeah, it was a bitter end. Sometimes there's a bitter end to it. Having faith in God means you got to go to the bitter end. No matter how bitter it is. And be faithful. He'll keep faith with you and pluck you from the fire. He will pluck you from the grave and stand you up again and make you to live so you can praise him. And the reason God is God of the living and not God of the dead, because in his mind, it's like a lot of things where he talks. He's like, Jesus, let all the angels worship him. Let all the creation worship him. Every knee will bow. Not will bow, but he is, will bow, yes. But he is king. He is enthroned. He is ascended into heaven in victory. All things are put under his feet. That was the specific idea in Hebrews. All things are put under his feet, but we do not yet see all things put under his feet. So it remains that things got to be put under his feet. Meaning, the thing God states is a promise. You will live. And he knows from the beginning he did it. He knows who the living are and who the dead are. Because right now, that's what the people... He looks at people as living or dead. If you are going to inherit his kingdom and live with him forever, you are alive. If you are a person who is not, you're dead. And he sees you alive and you're dead. It's like when someone says, like, oh man, I'm dead. Why? Because I did this and blah, blah, blah. So my fate is determined. I'm dead. So that's spiritual death. You know what I mean? Because in the spirit, God knows you're dead. You know? And in a sense, like in the spirit, in our lives, as we experience them, we're all dead. Until God... Because those things that make us alive have to happen. And though God sees us as living from the beginning of time, because the works were done from the beginning, they were finished at the beginning. He sees that, but he also puts us in the situation, and in that moment, we are also dead spiritually. Because we know not God, or we have not received the gospel, or we have not the faith of Christ. But death, being dead, you don't praise God. The viewpoint of death, the assumed understanding is what death is that it's a place of silence, of no celebrations, of no hope. As it says elsewhere, the dead know not anything. Yeah, I'll better, instead of just throwing that out there. Thoughts perished. Yeah. I'll bring it up for you in just a second. All right. Here we go. Oh, come on. What are you doing wrong? Oh, that's Bible collection, transition. All right. Wait a second. That's weird. I must be doing something wrong. Let me see here. Thoughts, perish, search. Yeah. Well, let's do it. Okay, that's good enough. Psalm 146:4. Put not your trust in princes, nor in the Son of Man, in whom there is no hope. That means, Jesus came as the Son of Man, meaning representing all mankind. But here it means all mankind in that sense. Not in the sense of Christ himself, the Son of Man, the Son of God, the ultimate man. But the ultimate man in the sense of all mankind. Trust not in man. Or in prince, meaning in princes, nor in just your average Joe. All men are not able to help. His breath goeth forth, he returneth to his earth. Dust thou art, and to dust thou shalt return. In that very day, his thoughts perish. Happy is he that hath the Lord God of Jacob for his help. That's good enough. But that's that's how they thought in the Old Testament. Because the hope beyond the grave is only hinted at. Isaiah hints at it. And well, more than hints, right? We've done Isaiah quite a bit. See, Isaiah quite more than hints at. I'm sorry, I got that. This is just a mess. He more than hints at a life beyond the grave. He talks about my dead body shall arise. The living shall pray, as I do, that the fathers to his children shall make known the truth. He knows he's still going to die. You know what I mean? But God's salvation has given him hope. And so the Lord was ready to save me. I see in this the casting of the sins behind their back. It's the implication that God has accepted him. And he feels the joy of being accepted of God graciously and having his sins forgiven him. The father to the children shall make known thy truth. He's looking to the future. There will be children that, they may already be born. I don't know. I didn't check that, if he's childless or not. But the point is, it's not just children. It's like disciples too. It's like, right now I'm a father making things known to children, in a sense. of that I'm, in the sense that I think of like as programming, you have parented objects and childed objects, and it's just that they are being fed by other things. I mean, it's a one-way relationship, parent to child. I mean, and roles can be reversed and all that. People can learn from the student and all that, or learn from the child. That's rare. When they become adults, I've learned from children and from little children. I've only learned things about children that children taught me inadvertently. Sorry, I had to blast myself with a little coal there. I've only learned those things that they inadvertently revealed. But anyways, the father to the children shall make known thy truth. The truth of God is passed on from generation to generation. And this is, look at, the grave cannot praise you, so we must do it while we live. We must give our service to God while we live, because he sustains and gives us life. And that is all our hope in the Lord. But we have not hope. This sounds a little bit like hope in this life only. You know what I mean? And so he's going to go forward for the rest of his life in faith, sing his songs to the stringed instruments, along with the stringed instruments, Sing it to the piano. Sing it to the stringed instruments. That's how I think that is the force of that. And, like along with, I always like that reference to stringed instruments there, upon my stringed instruments. Because I do the whole book of Isaiah on my stringed instrument, or at least it's partially done. So, and praising and singing to God, it is a good spiritual exercise to sing to the Lord. It is, it's empowering, it's uplifting, it's encouraging. It should be anyways. Depends on what you're singing, I guess, It can be comforting. It can be all those things, depending on what you're singing. Of course, there's do I have to mention that I have music and songs for free on my website? That's seems unnecessary. All the days I live in the house of the Lord. I have music videos also on my other channel. And so we talked about the lump of figs. There's nothing much to say beyond that, except that they put a lump of figs on this boil that he had. I guess that's what he had, some sort of boil that was going to kill him or something. But the lump of figs is not meant to be an actual cure, but a symbolic thing, because he's being healed by a miracle of God. Otherwise, he would, if they thought figs were the common cure for boils of some sort. And I'm not sure exactly what the boil was. Well, it could be anything. As far as we're concerned, it could be cancer. It could be, an infection. Boiling up like a bubble. Who knows? And Hezekiah had said, what is the sign I should go up to the house of the Lord? We're trying to figure out what is the sign. What that refers to. We talked about that several times. I have, again, it's somewhere in here. I don't think it's that important. But he throws it at the end, so it makes me feel like there's something to it. But I just don't know if there is much of a thing to it. Just that he wanted to know what is the sign. I think we talked about that a bit last time, so we're just going to move on. We're going to chapter 39. We're going to read it now. It's a brief chapter. Let's see. At that time, Merodach-Baladan, the son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent letters and a present to Hezekiah, for he had heard that he had been sick and was recovered. And Hezekiah was glad of them, and showed them the house of his precious things, the silver and the gold and the spices, and the precious ointment, and all the house of his armor. Nor in all his dominion, and all the house of his armor, and all that was found in his treasures, there was nothing in his house, nor in all his dominion, that Hezekiah showed them not. Then came Isaiah the prophet unto King Hezekiah, and said unto him, What said these men? And from whence came they unto thee? And Hezekiah said, They are come from a far country unto me, even from Babylon. Then said he, What have they seen in thy house? And Hezekiah answered, All that is in my house they have seen. There is nothing among my treasures that I have not showed them. Then Isaiah said to Hezekiah, Hear the word of the Lord of hosts. Behold, the days come that all that is in thy house, and that which thy fathers have laid up in store until this day, shall be carried to Babylon. Nothing shall be left, saith the Lord. And of thy sons that shall issue from thee, which thou shalt beget, shall they take away, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. Then said Hezekiah to Isaiah, Good is the word which the Lord hath. Good is the word of the Lord which thou hast spoken. He said, moreover, For there shall be peace and truth in my days. For peace he had great bitterness. And then he receives this kind of terrible prophecy. When he takes it, he says, Good. Is that a test or something? I'm at peace. I have received my peace from God. Good. And sometimes people give Hezekiah a hard time here. You could look at it as he did something wrong. Because I don't know if he did anything wrong, but there's an essential part of human nature here that's sort of being displayed, right? He'd been sick. He was besieged and sick, and now he gets letters from the king of Babylon and a present. Merodach Baladan, the son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent letters and a present. And it's funny because it's like I said, Babylon is still interweaving in this whole story. It's coming up. But they had the doom of Babylon in chapter 13 and 14. But it was with the Medes. The Medes are far away. The coming of the Medes and Persians to Babylon. That is still far off. And still also as far off the Babylonian captivity. But it's coming. And so, Merodach Baladan, son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sends these presents and a letter. And he was glad of them. Them being, there would be the emissaries sent. So he welcomed the emissaries, from Babylon, and showed them everything in his dominion. They seemed to be friends, And you got to think, when he was abandoned on all sides with no friends, and Egypt not helping, and then this distant country, they heard he'd been sick, and they write him, they treat him nice. He sort of invites them in and shows them everything. But they are the enemy. He doesn't know that. And right now, they aren't the enemy. Right now, they aren't. Merodach Baladan is no threat to Judah. The Assyrians are still a real power. Even after not taking Jerusalem, even after the death of Sennacherib, it's not like Assyria is staggering yet, But their power this is the twilight of their empire. Babylon is not yet an enemy, really, but they will be an enemy. And so he shows them everything, and he shows the Babylonians everything he's got. All the way, but this goes back to, this is Solomon's temple. This is not Ezra's temple, or Nehemiah's temple, or the Herod's temple, because Ezra and Nehemiah rebuilt the temple after the Babylonian captivity. They rebuilt the temple. And then that was the temple that was there when Jesus walked, but it was also heavily added to by Herod. He had added to that temple he'd really tricked out the surrounding things and done these walls and done a lot to really what's the word I want make it bigger and more grand. Let's just say that. as far as the annexes and different buildings and stuff. He had done, like, well, and so it was called often Herod's temple, as far because it was the temple after he had done his renovations, I guess. I don't know if he did any, like, in the actual temple proper, but, like, the temple complex. Okay, and I think that's part of what's still standing on the Western Wall. All right. So, all his dominion that has okay. So he shows them the precious things, the silver, the gold, because Jerusalem's never been taken since the days of David. Jerusalem is untaken since the days of David. And it was very rich at one point, from Solomon's time. And from David's time, because David had the largest kingdom. Well, in Solomon's time, it reached its apex. And then from his son on, everything just fell apart. As far as the kingdom itself fell apart, actually, into two kingdoms. And the son of David reigned over the smaller part. But he still reigned and ruled. So he says unto them, what do these men say? Whence did they come? You get this feeling that it is sort of like, oops, he made a mistake. But he didn't really make a mistake. You could say that, you could see in it the glimpse of human nature that, he being sick, being mocked, and now coming through all this and feeling good again, and then someone is nice to him, another king. Why not show off as a king to, let him say, oh, the riches of Jerusalem. Oh, the riches of Jerusalem. Well, those stories will be carried in Babylon for a long time. And the king of Babylon will come to Jerusalem because he will know it's a prize. Now, whether or not Merodach Baladan sent his, what's Hezekiah going to do? Execute the emissaries? They're just there to say hi and to spy things out probably a bit. Now, Hezekiah, I don't know, he's perhaps a little naive. He was only 39. He showed them all his, he didn't want to seem like a defeated little king. He wanted to kind of stand up as a son of David and show off his kingdom. And you could say, they are come from a far country unto me. There's like a very kind of, even from Babylon. They came to see me. A little bit of vanity there maybe, huh? It's hard not to be a bit vain when you're a king, But Hezekiah was one that God loved. It's not for lack of love of the things of God, but he's just a bit, he's charmed by these visitors. And so he shows them everything. Then Isaiah says, yeah, this is what God says. This is what the Lord of hosts, he puts in the hosts here, because the Lord of armies. Whenever the prophecies come from the Lord of hosts, it's always a bit more violent. It means violence is about to be prophesied usually. The days come. Now those prophecy stuff, the days come, behold, that all that is in thy house and that which your fathers have laid up in store until this day. His fathers had laid up in store for years, generations. Nothing shall be left. Babylon's going to carry away everything. Everything you fought for to keep. And the sons that you will have, they are going to be taken away and be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. And also, that's the end of the line of David. It essentially is. I will not take my mercy away from him. How'd that work? Well, it's interesting that even in the midst of this, it's like, it's always been for those who seek it. The mercy has always been for those who want it. Many of David's descendants had no mercy. God killed them without mercy, and they get no mercy. But mercy was always there for the sons of David until they didn't want it. But still many are of the seed royal. There are, as far as like the actual genetic descendants of David, of course, persisted and may still persist. They persisted long after, but not as kings. The line of kings ends at the Babylonian captivity. It ends. There are no more Israel kings. That's why the Anglo-Israelite, I don't know what you call it. It's not a religion. It's like a addendum to the Christian religion, or a sect of Christians that I used to be part of. In Anglo-Israelitism, they believe that Jeremiah spirited away the two daughters of which king? Oh, I forgot his name. Oh, boy, that's not cool. Oh, whatever. The two daughters of the king, one of the second, was it the last or second last? Zedekiah's two daughters. The two tender twigs. And the idea was that he took them off, or he sent them off with someone or something, or Jeremiah himself, or I don't know, but to England. And there they established the line of David again. And that's the story. Well, and also they took the stone, Jacob's pillar, that Jacob laid his head on, and it is supposedly sitting under the chair. Was it King Edward's chair? The chair on which the kings and queens of England are coronated. It's this old chair, and there's a stone sitting under it, a rectangular block of stone. Anyway, that's the legendary. I don't know. I've always been able to. I can find no correlation outside of Anglo-Israelite propaganda. That's one of the things people ask me questions about this, like E. Raymond Capt and stuff, his writings. Think about E. Raymond Capt. Confirm anything he says anywhere else. You can't. He essentially made it up or got it from one other person, I think. And it's just a totally fantasy story that sounds good, because you take a verse here, a verse there, and they're obscure verses about twigs and stuff, and they say, oh, this is what this means and that means, and the two daughters and all that. They are mentioned, and when we do those books, we'll look at that too. But the king line ceases, and even that would be sort of like, even so. The daughters, the succession was by sons. But whatever. I don't know. Here's the thing, is like, to get into that as a Christian, to me, is sort of like, what's the purpose? You know what I mean? So you can say, well, no, the sons of David are still on the throne in England. Seems kind of weird. But then they make the whole English nation actually Israel, too, because Israel kind of moves there. They kind of all migrate up to England, and they become the Britain is actually the home of Israel. I don't buy that. I don't buy any of that. It's an interesting little story to tickle the ears of people who are white, essentially. I'm part English. I could be, that's the funny thing, is like, I would find that people, no matter what their descent was, they saw themselves as Israelites. Even, I'm an Italian, but I'm Israel. All we white people are. It's just, I don't know. It's the black Hebrew Israelites, except you're the white Hebrew Israelites. And maybe not as, I don't know, maybe they don't have as obnoxious tactics, because no one ever sees the Anglo-Israelites because they're quiet. I never knew about it till I ran into Arnold Murray. But the sons that came from Hezekiah, not his immediate son, but down the line, they would be eunuchs. To a father, that's like a total defeat. Like, you have sons so you can have children, It doesn't say anything about his daughters. That's true. It's funny that I'm talking about the daughters, because it's like, yeah, well, because here's the thing. What I'm saying about the end of the line of David, but Paul, I didn't address that, of course, which is that Christ, his coming, fulfills God's promise to David, that he would have a man to sit on his throne forever. So he cut off the promise after Zedekiah, and it seemed like it was done. Like, there'd be no, David, that the line of David had been rejected. But the people still expected a Messiah who would be the son of David, who would come and return the fortunes of Israel, and restore the kingdom. Like they asked Jesus when he was ascending into heaven, right before, they said, "Wilt thou at this time restore the kingdom to Israel?" And then he didn't say like, "Oh no, that's not going to happen. We're going to do a spiritual kingdom." That's what he should have said, according to some people. But what he actually said was, "It is not for you to know the time or seasons," which implies that yes, I will restore the kingdom. Christ must reign. All things must actually be put under his feet, not just because God declares it, because it will happen. I mean, God says it because he will do it. And it's impossible for him to lie. But when God says it in human terms, like through the word, doesn't necessarily mean that that's the time it has to happen. It could be some other time. And that's the whole nature of prophecy, that it often comes many, many centuries ahead of the actual events. And it becomes even more powerful. You think about the long time since Jesus left. That's a long time. 2,000 years almost since he left. Because I count from when he left. And that's like, he left in like 27 to 30 AD. I'm never sure exactly, because it's like, they say he was born in 4 BC or 3 BC or 2. I even saw one time 8, whatever. He was born around there, around 4 BC, let's say. And he was about 30 years old when he began his ministry. And his ministry was, at minimum, I would say, well, whatever. I think I figured like there were about 3 years. And then, though if you read some Gospels, it seems like it's not. It seems like it's so short. But if you read John has these just time factors that I went through, and just, they make it, because I had always assumed Jesus' 3-year ministry, because people always said so. And then I went to a church where they're like, no, 1 year. And I looked into it and I thought, that's not right. Because it's based on looking at like Matthew or Mark or Luke. And it seems like just 1 year, one cycle of feasts. A little over a year, of course. Not one just calendar year, but a year and then some. But then in John, I found that 2.5 years would be like the minimal, as far as like that you could squeeze or something like that. I forgot exactly what number I came up with, but it was much more than one. And not that that's a big deal. I don't think that's a big deal, but if we make a big deal about it, it is. And that's the thing that got me, is because I remember there was a girl in church who was saying like, I was preaching the gospel and I told them, in my church we believe that Jesus had a 1 year. Okay, now it's going. Okay, great. I don't watch that little, the speed monitor or whatever the heck this thing is all the time, but just looking at it for a second kind of freaks me out, because it was 0 and red. So, to a father, your sons being eunuchs is not exactly what a father aspires. Someday my boy will be a eunuch in some other man's house. You know what I mean? They're the sons of a king, but instead he takes them and makes them into eunuchs for his house. I mean, they will have no children. And that's the fact, that's what the book of Daniel is. The young men of the seed royal, like Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I forgot their Hebrew names. But they all got new names and got castrated and became eunuchs in the house of the king of Babylon. And became his chiefest advisors also, So, there was a lot, the captivity in Babylon is that's where the book of Daniel is written. And it's pretty crazy when you think about it. Like the influence Babylon being there. Like it feels, the book of Daniel is confusing in that sense. Like because all the symbols and that such. They shall take away and be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. And like I say, he says, good is the word of the Lord which I have spoken. Good, the word of the Lord. Because he's not about to say, what? As he indicated, he is thankful. He could be dead. He wouldn't even be hearing about this. He's happy to be alive. But that's God. You know what? Whatever that goes back to what Hezekiah has discovered, what Jesus taught in the parable of the workers' wages. That God is good. Even if he's going to he's going to take away all the riches that your fathers left, and they're going to go to Babylon, and all your sons, to be able to still say, that's good. It must be because God has commanded it. And besides, he has proclaimed to me, he has told me already that there'll be peace in my day. So what can I do? I have peace. Shall I go to war with Babylon? Because sometimes, no. There shall be peace and truth in my days. Okay. And well, because he also knows that if this happens with his sons, that they will be responsible for it. Because in his days there will be peace and truth. And the truth is important because that's where they get into trouble. They stray from the truth. They stray from God and they go to idols. Because idols offer other things. God has commandments. God has restrictions. Ways in which we should not behave. Things we should not do. It has all kinds of restrictive things. And some of the other gods are permissive. What city is complete without a sex god, How can you have a good time without the gods of wine and beer? Because the heathen always had gods that represented those things and represented the celebration of those things, They had god of mirth making. I don't know how they, but the idea is their representation of a god of such a thing implies that that the activity has an approval on it. So if we're going to continue today, we actually need another chapter. I wonder if I shouldn't just cut this study short so we can be in a fresh chapter. It is a new chapter in Isaiah overall also. We're going to shift gears into what's known as the latter portion. It is a latter portion. Some people say there were two Isaiahs, and that this Isaiah is not the same as the other Isaiah. I tend not to think so. I know why they think so. The voices, we'll see, but the voice is similar, but different. Also, I don't know. We'll see. Well, we're going to go through it and judge it for ourselves, instead of letting the scholars tell us. Because the nature of things has changed. The Assyrians have departed. The prophecy changes. The voice in which God is speaking changes. It went from, prepare yourselves to die. You're going to captivity. You're pissing me off, whatever, to comfort you, my people. It's a change in tenor. So there's a lot of change. So, we're going to read it again tomorrow, and so let's read it today. Keeping in mind what we've just been through. The Assyrians, the deliverance, Hezekiah being sick, the Babylonians, the prophecy, the knowledge, it's coming. Comfort ye, my people, saith your God. Speak ye comfortably to Jerusalem, and cry unto her that her warfare is accomplished, that her iniquity is pardoned, for she hath received of the Lord's hand double for all her sins. The voice of him that crieth in the wilderness, prepare ye the way of the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be exalted, every mountain and hill shall be made low, and the crooked shall be made straight, and the rough places plain. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together, for the mouth of the Lord hath spoken it. The voice said, Cry. And he said, What shall I cry? All flesh is grass, and all the goodness thereof is as the flower of the field. The grass withereth, the flower fadeth, because the Spirit of the Lord bloweth upon it. Surely the people is grass. The grass withereth, the flower fadeth, but the word of our God shall stand forever. O Zion, that bringest good tidings, get thee up into the high mountain, O Jerusalem, that bringest good tidings. Lift up thy voice with strength. Lift it up, be not afraid. Say unto the cities of Judah, behold your God. Behold, the Lord God will come with strong hand, and his arm shall rule for him. Behold, his reward is with him, and his work before him. He shall feed his flock like a shepherd. He shall gather the lambs with his arm, and carry them in his bosom, and shall gently lead those that are with young. Who hath measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, and meted out heaven with a span, and comprehended the dust of the earth in a measure, and weighed the mountains in scales, and the hills in a balance? Who hath directed the Spirit of the Lord, or been his counselor, and taught him? Or being his counselor hath taught him? With whom took he counsel, and who instructed him, and taught him in the path of judgment, and taught him knowledge, and showed him the way of understanding? Behold, the nations are as a drop of a bucket, and are counted as the small dust of the balance. Behold, he taketh up the isles as a very little thing. And Lebanon is not sufficient to burn, nor the beasts thereof sufficient for burnt offerings. All nations before him are as nothing. They are counted to him as less than nothing, and vanity. To whom will you liken God? Or what likeness will ye compare him to? The workman meteth out a graven image, and the goldsmith spreadeth it over with gold, and casteth silver chains. He that is so impoverished that he hath no oblation chooseth a tree that will not rot. He seeketh unto him a cunning workman to prepare a graven image that shall not be moved. Have ye not known? Have ye not heard? Hath it not been told you from the beginning? Have ye not understood from the foundations of the earth? It is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth, and the inhabitants thereof are as grasshoppers, that stretcheth out the heavens as a curtain, and spreadeth them out as a tent to dwell in, that bringeth the princes to nothing. He maketh the judges of the earth as vanity. Yea, they shall not be planted. Yea, they shall not be sown. Yea, their stock shall not take root in the earth, and he shall also blow upon them, and they shall wither, and the whirlwind shall take them away as stubble. To whom will you liken me? Or shall I be equal, saith the Holy One? Lift up your eyes on high, and behold, who hath created these things, that bringeth out their host by number? He calleth them all by names, by the greatness of his might. For that he is strong in power, not one faileth. Why sayest thou, O Jacob, and speakest, O Israel, my way is hid from the Lord, and my judgment is passed over from my God? Hast thou not known, hast thou not heard, that the everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, fainteth not, neither is weary, there is no searching of his understanding. He giveth power to the faint, and to them that have no might he increaseth strength. Even the youths shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not be faint, and not faint. Not bad. It's a long... See, I don't really detect a change in the spirit, but a bit of tone. Like, seems to speak with the same voice to me. But yeah, there is a definite difference, but it's it's celebratory. And it's sort of like from a position of, the first part of Isaiah was very dark, not entirely, but there was hope in the darkness. Now this is emerging from darkness, and it's like, celebratory in a sense. But also, from the very beginning, I feel like, man, when I see this, the first 2 verses is all we're going to talk about till we're done. Maybe not even that. It was a long reading. That was good. We're going to read it again. Hopefully, I don't know. Are we going to read it every time? I don't know. Because it's hard from the beginning to the end to, like, it is, I don't know. To hold that all in my mind as a singular, it moves. There's a lot of rhetorical questions. There's a lot of ideas thrown out there which are really going to be great to discuss. But as far as, like, it's not as story-like, but we'll probably read it every time just because I do think that actually reading the passage at the beginning of the study is a good idea, because maybe some people just tuning in would like to even just hear a passage read. And so maybe that's all they care to hear. Because I can understand why someone's like, I like listening to him read the Bible, but I get tired of hearing him talk. So if every study began with, the only problem is chapter 39 is buried in the midst here. I should have read at the beginning with 38, because I thought, surely we'll get through both, and I was right. I guess I thought I might go on and on about the dead. Like I might get just distracted for a full hour talking about where the dead are, but I guess I just really didn't feel led that way. So, all right, so comfort you, my people, saith your God. Speak ye comfortably to Jerusalem, and cry to her that her warfare is accomplished. Now the thing is, in Hezekiah's time that's true, but one of the suggestions is that this was written during the captivities, or actually after, I guess. And then it would make sense if this was referring to Jerusalem after the captivity or after this. But even then, what about, because the thing is, the second temple, Herod's temple we talked about, the temple rebuilt after the Babylonian destruction, that also gets destroyed, and Jerusalem is, again, trodden down of the Gentiles. And as it's written, Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles till the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. And the Gentiles still tread down Jerusalem. The Jews control it, but they don't control it. They don't control it. You know what I mean? Because they can't. Because the Temple Mount is not under their control. They kind of control it. They control the territory that it's in. They control it around, but they don't get to do whatever they want with it. Now, technically, they could, because they do technically control it, but in a certain sense, they don't control it. You know what I mean? They don't have, they haven't, it's sort of like the way the president doesn't have the power to mandate vaccines, but he tried to anyways. You know what I mean? They could sort of illegally do what they'd like to do, or what they may like to do, as far as with the Dome of the Rock and all that, because that's where their temple's supposed to go, not the Dome of the Rock. That's not they would like to put a temple there to Yahweh, the presence of a Muslim mosque has to be very grinding. You know what I mean? Because it's like the Muslim religion for the Jews is an enemy. Well, it doesn't have to be, but they have been. And especially because Muhammad relegated Jews and Christians to they weren't to be destroyed like the pagans, but they were sort of second-class citizens. They should come to ultimate realization and accept Allah. This is what they would probably prefer. Of course, if you join, they're one of those religions that if you join them, all's forgiven. So it's very tempting when they're going to execute you. Like, well, we'll execute, or you could convert to Islam. How about that? So one way to spread your religion. Speak ye comfortably. So this seems almost to me, like I said, she hath received of the Lord's hands double for all her sins. Babylon, mystery Babylon in the book of Revelation, double unto her double. And they are the 2 witnesses are put to death in the street of that great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth. They were put to death in the streets of that great city, where also our Lord was crucified. making that very clear. But I've always thought that the ultimate Babylon, Mystery Babylon in Revelation, is a representation of unholy Jerusalem and her sins. And then notice it says in Revelation that she receives double unto her double. And the cup which she hath filled to her double. But Jerusalem also is symbolically representative of the bride of Christ. Holy Jerusalem descending out of heaven from God is like a bride adorned for her husband. And the part of what, when it talks about those who in Hebrews, when it talks about all the forefathers who in faith died looking for a country, looking for the promise, what they're looking for is the mother of us all, heavenly Jerusalem. You know what I mean? But there is another Jerusalem that is in opposition, and it occupies the same physical space. It's the corrupt Jerusalem. Jerusalem not as a chaste bride, a virginal, and waiting for her husband and dressed in white, as a sign of her virginity and purity, but rather, she rides a scarlet-colored beast full of names of blasphemy. She's decked in scarlet also herself, actually. The woman was decked in gold and precious stones and pearls. She's got all decked out with jewelry and expensive cloth. But ultimately, Jerusalem will be a place of peace, though it has often been the site of war and probably once again will be. Definitely. There's yet warfare to be accomplished at Jerusalem. There's yet warfare. I cannot speak comfortably, but I will speak comfortably to Jerusalem because, as per God's promise, you, God's people, the citizens of heavenly Jerusalem, your warfare is accomplished. You know what I mean? It's done. God's already done it. He's finished it. All we have to do is live it. And still, for us, that's a hard thing, but we can do it knowing. Hezekiah said good because all things work together for good for those that love God, for those that are called according to his purposes. Okay, we'll pick it up with chapter 40 tomorrow. Thanks for joining me in this study. I look forward to being back again tomorrow. Here we go.
Make me to understand the way of thy precepts. So shall I talk of thy wondrous works. My soul melteth for heaviness. Strengthen thou me according to thy word. Remove from me the way of lying, and grant me thy law graciously. I have chosen the way of the truth. Thy judgments have I laid before me.